Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
If you're getting ready for the Cyber 5, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and all those days in between, holiday season, and you're wondering how to maximize your ROI on your media investments, you're going to love this show. We brought in Samantha Kelley, the CEO of Touché Canada, which is Canada's largest media buying agency. This show's packed with great tidbits. I hope you love it.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Mark Binkley and Vasilis Douros, share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Welcome back to another episode where today we're joined by someone who both Mark and I actually worked with over the years. She's a great media mind with years of experience and was just named CEO of Touché Canada and Omnicom Media Group. And she also sits on the Canadian Media Directors Council. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Fun to see you guys.
Yeah, this is great. This is like I'm flashing back to all these old memories of different campaigns and things we did. It's so fun.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things when you get to bring on people that you've worked with in the past and just kind of see like how their careers have, obviously transpired over the years. And I know I can speak more for Mark here. So incredibly proud of the achievements that you've come by. So congrats once again on the huge promotion.
Thank you very much.
So we're getting into Q4 and it's such an active time for many advertisers. And we thought, why not bring one of Canada's largest, if not largest, I think it's the largest media agency in Canada. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. On the show to really walk us through, what can advertisers kind of look towards during this such an active season. When we're thinking about, a lot of organizations make or break their years in Q4. So it becomes such an important part of strategy. So we thought, let's bring Sam on so she can guide us, not only Mark and I, but guide our listeners to some of those best practices we can kind of think towards and potentially even, adopt as they're likely in the midst of really planning the big, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, holiday season, et cetera. And then obviously anything going into January. So that's why you're here. And we're excited.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And we're excited.
Yeah, I mean, Q4 is certainly high stakes for many, many categories. So glad to be speaking about it today.
Yeah. So how about for us to kick things off is really kind of understanding those holiday season trends and some of those consumer behaviors, because things do change over the year on how consumers actually interact with a lot of these brands and advertisers in Q4. So can you share some of those insights and perhaps any of the current trends on consumer behaviors that business should be aware of? And as they gear up for, the Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and even holiday season?
Yeah. So, when you think of Q4, you think of it as a sprint, but really isn't. It's a marathon. The Q4 is more and more holidays is not only about those last weeks before Christmas. Mm-hmm. It's retailers are really trying to push up sales or bring up sales and get a share of wallet earlier and earlier in the season. Of course, there's Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but obviously we just went through an Amazon Prime Day as well here in Canada. So you can see that retailers are really trying to get creative and stimulating consumers earlier and earlier. And so we really have to think about the holiday season as a marathon, but as well to prepare like well in advance and avoid doing too many new things or things that haven't been tested before. I do have a couple of stats for you on the shopping habits of consumers. Mm-hmm. So it's projected that 23% of consumers will complete their holiday shopping ahead of what we call Cyber 5 now. So Black Friday and Cyber Monday.
Cyber 5, I like that.
Cyber 5,
sounds so fancy.
And an estimated 50% of those shoppers will continue to spend into December. So we also, there are not only opportunities to seize wallets before the key retail moments of the fourth quarter, but as well to kind of keep going at it and trying to seek even more dollars out of consumers' wallets as they get closer to the Christmas season.
Sorry, was that 23% of shoppers are going to have their Christmas shopping done?
Complete, yeah.
Jesus, I'm not one of that 23%, that's for sure.
funny though, because I
No one
remember,
in
and
marketing
this
is.
is like, weirdly enough, I kind of am, but it's mostly
Of
because I
course
have,
you are.
well, not really, but no, because I have family in Ontario. So I would often look at like the
Mm.
stuff I want to buy, and then the survey of one, right? But it's interesting that you bring it up because the survey of one would say, well, I want to buy all this stuff on discount and have it shipped because I don't want to worry about shipping issues leading
Right.
into the
Right.
holiday and get it over to my family. And then for the rest of the holiday season, I just look for deals for myself.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not the only person that shops in that way. I must say though that shipping has become much more sophisticated
Yeah.
than say 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So shipping in very short term. You guys would remember the days where we had like cutoff dates for
Yeah.
shipping.
Well,
That's not as severe as in the past. Retailers have really stepped up their game in terms of quick and nimble shipping in the holiday season.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was always two deadlines that we looked towards. It was code freeze and then the shipping deadline. So when we couldn't make any changes to a website or whatever. So those were the two dates we always had circled in our calendars. So yeah, no,
Exactly.
that's insane. 23%.
Sam, on the front of like the media landscape, I mean, it's something we actually haven't talked about a lot, but I think it happens more and more and more. I mean, go back 50 years, you had TV, radio, and print and out of home. That was pretty much it.
Yeah.
Now, the attention span of people, I don't know, actually, that's maybe the wrong way to say it, but the attention is fragmented across multiple forms of media now. So from a media perspective, how do you guys look at the landscape? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good question in general, not just in the fourth quarter. Media habits have been changing significantly throughout the pandemic, after the pandemic. Writers' strike and all of that is obviously affecting how people are consuming linear TV. So we're kind of always, we have our, taking the pulse of what consumers are doing it in terms of media, because that's our job, right? To chase the consumer and reach them at a moment where we can deliver like memorable ad impression to them at the right time. So many things have changed. Obviously, video has changed significantly, where there is a transition to connected channels, whether that's connected TV, online video, a lot of social video is happening as well. Of course, everyone has been down the rabbit hole of TikTok a couple of times. So certainly video consumption is changing, but as well, we're getting a little bit more sophisticated in understanding attention of consumers, and also understanding that if you factor in attention on the CPM, you're really looking at it at metrics in a different way.
Yeah.
So you would think that like most advertisers would praise YouTube, which is a very effective channel if used the right way. But if you just look for the lowest cost per view, then you're not factoring in attention. And when you factor in attention on the on a tactic that's perceived as low cost per view, it actually is much more expensive than some of the premium formats or forced videos. So you really have to factor in attention. If you guys have heard of amplified intelligence,
Yeah.
I would recommend you look into. So it's Karen. Exactly. She issued a study on attention, and we have purchased her data and inputted that into our planning systems, which allow us to make decisions on reaching attentive seconds, not just video seconds.
We didn't prep you for this question I'm going to ask you, but I'm curious if it's something you've looked at, not necessarily number wise, but just looked at it from an attention perspective. Do you see a difference in things like brand recall and whatnot when you use attention heavy metrics as opposed to just buying cheap media?
100%. And it's tough because you have to, it's like chicken or egg when you try and explain this to clients. Like the way that advertising is measured is still today being disrupted slightly, but the way things are measured on the post campaign perspective versus the way clients measure campaigns in real time and optimize in real time is not quite aligned. So yes, so research tells us, like an Ipsos would confirm that the same 500 GRPs you buy today, you get lower levels of recall. So it's 10 points less. It's significant. That's not only consumers paying less attention. It's advertiser chasing low cost per view or attentive second or whatever the metric they're buying on. So that's certainly creating a negative impact on recall levels that have never been this low.
I'm sure even creative would have a big impact on that as well.
Absolutely. So there's an old statistic. I don't think it's as accurate today, but directionally probably right. There's an old statistic that said recall is 70% guided by quality of creative and memorability of creative, and then the rest is the rest of your marketing effort, including media.
Right. Just one back thing on behaviors. Are you seeing anything that's still lingering from the pandemic that we have that, kind of carried forward, or it's still relevant today? Or do you kind of see things more as, back as usual? Or
yeah, I mean, a couple of things. So obviously pandemic expedited or accelerated e-commerce. And so there was a really big hype in e-commerce. That's normalized a little, but the reality was e-commerce was growing well before the pandemic arrived. And so we're back to regular growth of e-commerce. So that's gonna continue to happen. And we can talk about this a little later on, but you'll see how that kind of trickles down into things like retail media and rise of investment in those platforms. But from an economics, like just macro perspective, there are uncertain times ahead of us, both economically. Inflation's never been this high. That's true for cost of advertising. And if you look at the average savings of a Canadian citizen or someone who lives in Canada today, if you think about it on a timeline, consumers had an amount X, and then during pandemic there wasn't a ton to spend money on, so people were saving their money for a rainy day, and some people started spending that money when we started to review the pandemic in a rear view mirror. So there was revenge travel. Some people bought some cars. Some people bought electric cars, and started saving and started spending their savings. Some people got RVs. I'm one of those. But if you were to look at savings today, we're back to pretty much what we were pre-pandemic.
So we're broke.
And so we're back to being broke. We're back to being normal, essentially. So all of that, kind of macro and what the consumer has to spend is going to influence how they approach their spending this season. And we are seeing that in a bit of a slowdown in retail that started up to 4 quarters ago, and we think that that's going to carry on this year.
Yeah, we had Herman Simon on talking about inflation and the impact of that. It was really interesting because there's a lot of they did a study, his company, looking at the inflation impacts on consumer behavior, and so there's some things that people will be willing to spend money on, and other ones where they won't. And so it's not, the impact isn't equal across all industries either.
No, that's a good point, because if you have a really strong brand love, which is a different type of investment than what you would typically see in the fourth quarter, if you have really strong brand love, then consumers might be willing to spend on your products, where, if you're just, selling commodity at a good price, then you won't necessarily have that intent.
As far as the creative goes, is there any campaigns that you've seen that you'd like to chat about with respect to like changing behaviors in holidays?
So there's a brand that we all love called SportChek. You've heard of them, right? Calgary based.
I think I saw that once somewhere.
They've done some really good stuff
over the years. Especially the early days, right, Sam?
Yeah, early days for sure. Anyway, we ran a Black Friday, Cyber Monday at the time. We weren't calling it the Cyber 5. It was just a Black Friday, Cyber Monday campaign. And essentially what we did is we knew, so at the time, Black Friday, Cyber Monday was like a week later than the regular calendar, which
Right.
means we only had 4 weeks for sales as opposed to 5.
Mm.
If you work in retail, you realize how huge that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we did is we knew that consumers were delaying their purchases to that moment
Mm-hmm.
that year. And there was a lot of anxiety around products not being available.
Mm-hmm.
And so consumers, that's the beautiful thing about them. They're vocal. They'll leave comments and they'll talk about, do better, or this product is not available.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we did to tap into that opportunity, you really have to be opportunistic in the fourth quarter. So we used social listening tools, API, like website scraping tools,
Mm-hmm.
to identify those bad shopping experiences and then come in with a custom offer from SportChek on those products that they were looking for but weren't able to find elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
or not able to find at a good price, or out of stock items, kind of things. So and then of course we tied dynamic creative to that so that we could custom the offer and the price and the shipping offering.
Mm-hmm.
And that campaign did really well. We isolated the products that we used based on the audiences from social listening,
Mm-hmm.
to our overall average of efforts for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the return on investment was 70% higher for the moments where we had been opportunistic in chasing down the consumer that had a bad shopping experience elsewhere.
That's a great one, actually.
Yeah, that's really cool. It strikes me like, because, and it may have changed, but when we worked with you, not just you, but your whole team and everything, like
Right.
at Touché PhD, that was really media focused, and more media became kind of integrated with technology, but not creative. And when you're just describing that campaign, because you're using dynamic creative, it's AI generated, I'm sure, to some degree, where you take the pieces and it gets assembled, but you're also now doing some creative, by the sounds of it, execution, but using all the technology and all the data mining to develop the creative offer.
Right. Yeah. So media has explored much more, or is well beyond the typical definition of media that we had
Right.
5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, we use different tech tools to build creatives. Now, media will never do creative; it's just a different skill set.
Totally.
Yeah.
I would not trust myself to develop a creative ad. I have a very analytical. I'm better at finance than I am creative, so that kind of explains it all. So we do certainly still need the creative agencies to work with us, but if they can build a toolkit of assets, then we can build the tech to scale the number of creatives so we can get to market in a fast manner, in almost a real-time manner. It really unlocks a lot of personalization, and we know that the more personalization you have, the higher return on investment you have as well. So that's just kind of table stakes at this point.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder then, and maybe you can share with us, when you're looking at like all these different formats that exist, you have dynamic ads, you have a lot of these publishers now, they're creating even more inventory that are making available to advertisers. We just saw, I think it was last week, they talked like Pinterest released some new tools, as did Meta, which is, creating that or reducing that friction to purchase for consumers, where you're shopping in the app or, anything like that. Just curious if you, especially in Q4, is there more or less a specific set of formats that advertisers should be chasing?
Yeah. So of course, video always works better than static. That's just how a human brain works, right? Where sight, sound, and motion is more effective than just sight. So video always works, whether it's and there's dynamic video as well. It doesn't. It's not much more heavier to produce video. You just have to be smart about it. It doesn't always have to be high production studio ready kind of. At this time of the year, like, you can get really scrappy about creating video assets. So video for sure, but as well for brands that don't sell directly to consumer, retail media is a really interesting option, especially in the fourth quarter, because it closes the gap of measurement, of sales measurement.
Right.
It also it also helps identify audiences that are raising their hands for the category of products that you're selling. So retail is not a format, but it is a channel that has its distinct type of formats that I think more and more brands should be considering, and agencies as well.
As far as the retail one, can you maybe just I can't get my head around retail. What do you mean by, like, can you just
retail media?
Yeah, just describe that in a bit more detail.
So we call them RMNs, retail media networks. It's the OG of retail media is, of course, Amazon.
Okay.
Where they have their app that most people use. You can use their website as well. But that has really exploded. It was estimations of in the US are up to $40 billion that retail media networks are worth in the States. It is the growth of it is the bulk of the growth in digital. So digital dollars continue to grow, digital ad dollars continue to grow, but very much fueled by the growth of investments in retail media networks. So other types of retail media networks that you're probably familiar with are Walmart Connect. LCL also has their retail media network. Canadian Tire is now coming in with theirs. So more and more retailers are coming in and offering two things. One, what we call O&O, which is owned and operated channels. So whether it's emails, websites, apps, custom offers. So there's the O&O side, but as well, most of the retailers have some form of data lake, whether that's fueled by a loyalty program, a website, a third party that brings ID. And what that unlocks is buying data to build audiences and custom creative and just deliver more relevant offers and relevant advertising to people that are relevant to the category of products that you sell. So the opportunity of retail is one of relevancy and as well one of measurement for sales for people that don't actually sell directly to consumers.
So it'd be like, in some ways, almost like the, how Amazon has their own platform for advertisers, same kind of thing, but for whoever the brand is that owns the websites.
Yeah. So retailers in general.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, that's actually an exciting new, I guess, prospect for a lot of advertisers because, by these retailers or, these organizations are opening up essentially like their data lakes to create or model some of those lookalike audiences or behavioral. Obviously, this all happened on the heels of the idea of like the deprecation of the cookie. It's going to make it a lot more difficult to really chase people. But now you go back to and use the lens of contextual, say, well, hey, there's a high propensity that my target audience may be using Canadian Tire or shopping at Canadian Tire. Well, how do we potentially leverage that data set to better target our products and services? So I think it's giving even more tools now to advertisers to get back to our, I shy away really talking about the personalization of ads because I think I'm of the mind that, and I think Mark, you'd agree, reach will still trump any personalization. It just depends where you're trying to personalize. And I think that's the nuance. But at the end of the day, with all this inventory that's coming out for advertisers, it is getting closer to giving that consumer close to the products or service that they would want regardless. So all in all, I think it's a win for not only consumers, but even organizations now that could probably augment their marketing budgets through these services.
Totally. But you're touching upon one thing that is a challenge for retailers and marketers, which is those so far dollars have been siloed. You have shoppers marketing and you have marketing. And more as retail becomes part of a broader marketing or more integrated marketing plan, marketers are figuring out how those two become a little bit more integrated and work together. So how can strat marketing take care of the awareness and consideration and brand love to set up the shoppers marketing teams that invest in retail? And then the question is, should it be in shoppers marketing or should it all be under marketing?
Yeah, fair. I mean, I suppose it comes back to that, like, right message, right place, right time kind of idea. Like the right place, there's just so many more places. And so you have to figure out where to put the biggest bets, knowing that you're going to have really great opportunities in some places and not in others.
Right.
Speaking of which, talking about the sort of the brand love idea, and generally about brand and then tactical. As far as creative goes, is there a benefit? Like we were talking about, I would say one-to-one oftentimes in the case you gave would be more about like the specific short-term activation. You were dissatisfied. Here's this ad. Here's this offer. Come by. So that's a short-term activation. The brand side would be something more like emotional, let's say, that doesn't have an offer and a product featured necessarily. So, or it would probably have a product feature, but it's not like buy this shoe now kind of thing.
Right.
So is there a creative approach that you've seen that you guys are kind of zoning in on that balances those, or are you just going all in on one or the other?
So is that question specific to the fourth quarter, or is it over time? Because in the fourth quarter, consumers are in shopping mode.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you don't have the luxury of trying to build brand and support product and offers at the same time. That's really, you have to be more proactive about, having your brand well established and that connection with the consumer, like preference. You want your brand to be preferred prior to that fourth quarter, so that when you do come in with an offer, even if it's not the most aggressive in the market, because there's always someone that will offer a lower price than you. But if you have that brand connection and love to capitalize on, then a good offer will be a good offer.
Right. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and move into, the notion of effective holiday and planning and strategy in totality. So I think it's important that we kind of think about what are those strategies that a lot of the advertiser business can use and adopt to kind of create those effective holiday advertising campaigns, and maybe some of the key principles and strategies that you recommend for winning the holiday season.
Yeah. So be prepared. I mean that in every sense. So you need to have just incredible focus. When we talk about strategy is really about focus. And so the pitfall is you try and do everything during the fourth quarter because stakes are so high. So you need to have a really clear strategy that probably doesn't start in the fourth quarter, but that has like a lead up into and then gets real in the fourth quarter. Another piece of advice I'd give is, fourth quarter stakes are so high, it's not time to start testing things because there's too much at stake. So I would suggest, if not a blackout period, at least like a dial down of like test and learn type campaigns. What you really want to be doing is have clarity on what your tried, tested, and true tactics are, and use those tactics as much as you can, at least until you've kind of maximized those opportunities to generate the results that you're looking for. Because and I'll use this example, I think you guys can relate to it. There's always a moment in time in the fourth quarter where sales are not what were expected, and so we get a call from some key stakeholder in the company that is nervous, and then teams start to spin, and then we what happens is the ditch to ditch, and we kind of lose sight of what that strategy is. Right.
Just overcorrect every time.
Yeah.
You just exactly. And then you end up you kind of look at in your post report of what you were trying to accomplish, and you lose kind of the view of what the strategy was. So you need to have really clear clarity on, what's the strategy and where should we be flexible when things don't go as planned. There has to be a portion of that that's stable, a portion of that that's flexible.
I like that.
Yeah. I'm just taking some notes here. So.
Yeah.
As far as, we talked a lot about digital, and digital now, I know I've seen stats like it's overtaken traditional media spending. As far as digital versus traditional and the mix there, is it all about digital, or are you optimizing just for clicks all the time? Like what kinds of things are you looking at from a perspective of the media landscape and the optimizations that you're kind of looking for?
Yeah. That kind of goes back to our question on, how do you follow trends and media habits? But more and more, those lines are becoming blurry. Like the TV that we have on the wall is no longer just a linear TV.
Yeah.
It's a screen on the wall that you can access You can access your YouTube. You can
Totally.
access
Yeah.
your platform, your streaming platforms. You can also access cable if you're still subscribed to it. So we're very much looking at plans holistically
Mm-hmm.
per ad format type. So if we're going to plan, we no longer say let's do a TV campaign.
Right.
We obviously plan video campaigns,
Right.
and that have multiple touch points within them.
And placement might
Is
be
there
TV. But it's the
exactly
video,
that
not
might
the
be on exactly. It's the TV screen,
Right.
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily linear
Right.
or traditional TV. Of course, traditional has lost a lot of share in ad dollars, and it's not our job to try and defend one or the other.
Mhm.
Our job is really to understand where the consumer is and ensure that we're kind of at the right place to reach that consumer with the type of ad message that we have to deliver. If you're investing less than 50% of your budget in digital, then you probably should be re-questioning that mix.
Mhm. Mark, remember we had Pierre on, and he talked about the evolution of radio and how it's also changing the landscape. And I'd be curious to kind of talk about that, because radio has always been one of those channels where it's the entry. It's a lower barrier to entry, but you still achieve mass reach. How are you seeing, advertisers leverage radio right now, especially during something like the holiday season? Is it like nutty?
Well, not as high reach as it used to be, especially for a younger demo. But as well, we don't say radio anymore; we say audio,
right?
Because you can reach consumers through audio on podcasts,
right?
And sorry,
that's okay.
I'm not, but those are the terms that we use. Sorry.
No, that's
so,
fair.
And then Spotify is an opportunity. There are there's fragmentation of the audio market that includes radio, especially for an older demo. But the way we use that channel now has certainly evolved to reflect more where the consumer is, which is not as much on radio and not as long of listening time on radio either.
Okay.
Another thought. So as we're talking about different kinds of placements that you have for audio or video, I'm trying to learn the language. From your perspective, do you look at, is there an advantage for going all in? Let's say I had $100. If I can't max out my spend on, say, YouTube, then I just spend all of my money on YouTube? Or do you go, well, divide that into 4 channels? Or, you know what I mean? Is there a way to approach how you distribute your budget?
Yeah. So the number, or the most sophisticated way you can determine how you invest your dollars is through what we call an MMM. It's a marketing mix model. So, and that will say, based on how your established brand is, your customers, what's the correlation between your ad dollars and the return on ad spend? And that will say, it will run hundreds of scenarios that say this is how much you can run on video, and most of the time you have room to invest more, unless you're in the top 10 advertisers, and then you have a different problem. But most advertisers run into the issue of not enough budget before they
That's true.
don't know where to invest anymore. But based on that, we can say the return on ad spend is highest on channel X. And so, optimize your budgets there. And then when you've hit that kind of moment or
diminishing return point,
diminishing return, then you can move to a different channel. So again, strategy is about focus. It's important to ensure that you're not spreading too thin, because by trying to do too much, you dilute the effort.
Yeah. Well, and imagine, going back to the conversation we were having before, with the volume of creative you would need to do a lot of these different channels and all the different inventory that's available. The more channels you do, the more creative impact it has as well on the team, whoever's producing it.
Exactly. And still today we see advertisers that are spending like 1 for 1, $1 in media, $1 in production.
Mm-hmm.
That shouldn't happen. Like the golden rule of investment is you want to be spending the bulk of your dollars reaching consumers, not trying to create a beautiful piece of creative that's going to eat up too much of your budget, that so much that you won't be able to get it seen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
That is a good point. And this is where you see like the rise of things like dynamic ad units, where it becomes, I think it really caters to that scrappiness that you were talking about, especially in Q4, which kind of leads me to my next question in terms of the importance around personalization during the holiday season. I know it can be a very controversial topic for many advertisers, and everyone has really their own opinion, but we know that there's been a rise in ad tech technology, the MarTech side, and it is giving us a lot more information than ever before. But how important is it really during Q4?
It is important.
Okay.
It does make a difference, but it cannot. They're kind of, if you see it on the spectrum, it can't be one extreme or the other. If it compromises reach, you're ineffective, because you have to reach consumers to be able to sell volume.
Yeah.
So you can't compromise reach. On the flip side, though, on the other side of the spectrum, if you're speaking to 100 people, then you might have a better return on ad spend for those 100 people, but you're going to top out that opportunity pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it's really about balance. But the more you personalize ads, the more relevant you become, and the more relevant you become, the better returns you see on your ad spend. So it's really about audience planning that gets you to that scale of reach that you need to be able to generate or hit the sales targets that you're hopeful for, and the growth that you're hopeful for, but without going to the one-to-one moment where that's kind of dangerous.
Like, just as an extension of that question, there's also a potential where you go, well, we've got these loyal customers that spend a lot with us. We're going to focus on them. Is that, I don't know if it's the same answer or not, but like, are you focusing on reaching your loyal customers, or are you trying to find everybody?
You always want to cater to your loyal customers, but that has to be part of a bigger reach play. So your loyal customers, you might have a special offer of quick delivery, or of personalized discount, or extra points on your purchases. Certainly your loyal customers are the ones that have the highest propensity of buying the products that they're looking for from you. So you can't neglect them, because if you do, then someone else will steal your lunch. But in the fourth quarter, there are so many people in market, and during the fourth quarter is really where people are least loyal.
Right.
So you have to be thinking about that broad reach and reaching the entire category, as opposed to only focusing on your loyal. The one thing I will say, though, for loyalty, on loyalty, is there is a really interesting opportunity for upselling and cross-selling in the fourth quarter with your loyal customers. So having a strategy that's specific to that and only takes a small portion of your budget but is high return is really a good consideration in addition to your Q4 plans.
There's so many things that are popping in my head right now. But let me ask this. So I know all of us kind of worked on the larger organization side, but have, relatively larger budgets and have an ability to remain really flexible, especially in Q4. If, we're seeing higher intent in some area, you're able to dump a little more money in, or we always had contingency for those scenarios. How about smaller organizations? Is there any advice that you would give a smaller organization that may not have the deep pockets, and how they should approach the Q4 blitz?
Yeah. I mean, if you're really small and any growth represents significant growth, then you can get away with focusing on low hanging fruit, because like I said, in the fourth quarter, there are a lot of people that are in market, and there's lesser loyalty in the fourth quarter than any other moment of the year. So if you're a disruptive startup type brand, and growth for you is a small percentage of share of market, then you can do very low funnel tactics and get away with that, just by having opportunistic offers in the market with good prices. But if you're a medium-sized advertiser, you have to be very sophisticated in how you approach your audience. You need to have, I mean, if you're a small size company, then you need to be targeting a small portion of the market. So knowing what your brand stands for, what, how that's compelling to a narrowed group of customers, and then really go hard on those customers. You kind of have to adapt your audience scale to the budget that you have to ensure that you're not just trying to spray and pray everyone, because you don't have the budgets to do that.
Right. Okay.
So actually, speaking of which, sorry, I feel like I know we're nowhere on script on this one. There's so many questions that are popping up as you're talking about this, Sam. But for budget setting, like, because there are so many people in market, how do you craft a budget around, like, if everything is an opportunity, I want all the money. You know what I mean? Like, how do you find ways to craft and justify a budget for this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, historical data really does help. So if you've gone through one holiday season, you know what the tactics are that worked well. You have clear kind of path to purchase view, so you understand which combinations of touch points work, not just the last one, because it's another pitfall to invest everything in the last click channel, which often is search. So understanding or just having a benchmark of what works well, but as well if you have a really good audience strategy, you know where your opportunities lie. So audience strategies will have scale of audience and then benchmark of performance, whether you're looking for a click, a visit, a view, a conversion. So if you use it becomes simple math at that point. Like, how many people are in this cluster of audience? What is the average, cost per whatever you're transacting on, and then how do I maximize that based on the returns that each of those clusters give me?
And then you add all those up, and it's kind of a bottom-up process for budgeting.
It is. It's really important to have an understanding of the overall performance of your combined channels. Right. So for that, you can run an MTA for that. You can also, like, I'm a big fan of the Markov curve, if you guys know that theory. It essentially allows you to understand that, people that were exposed to a video then were exposed to social and then were exposed to search, eventually went to the website and purchased, but went to the website organically. Well, it allows you to kind of give a weighting on the contribution of each of those channels.
Yeah, the Markov curve, if I remember correctly, keep me honest here, Sam, it's actually adopted for some of the attribution models that some organizations leverage. So
exactly.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we're talking about the Cyber 5. Let me share if I'm getting that terminology right. Is there a way to approach the Cyber 5 from a budget allocation perspective? So let's use Mark's $100. If you have $100 and you have these 5 key moments that you're investing against, as a percentage, you don't have to like $5 goes here, but roughly as a percentage, where would you kind of allocate your budget to make sure you maximize your opportunity for the holiday season?
I'd front load for sure.
Front load,
over the Cyber Monday, the Black Friday Cyber Monday, you're going to start running into supply issues, inventory issues, and you're also going to be left with a smaller pool of buyers than on at the beginning of your long weekend of sales. So we've started to see things like Gray Tuesday and Gray Thursday. So that's really to my point earlier, retailers trying to get that purchase before the bulk of purchases have been made. So by the time Cyber Monday comes around, you tend to see discounts that are deeper. But as well inventory that is smaller. So unless you're kind of happy with lower profit, if you're discounting more, you have lower profit, and smaller amount of buyers, I would really recommend that you spend as early as possible in the weekend, in the Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend, to ensure that you're really reaching the bulk of those buyers and not losing those not leaving those opportunities on the table.
And as far as I think you and I were going through this, or all of us were going through this together. There's because e-com is such a big component in terms of showcasing in product, but it's also the natural, there's a natural tendency to do the ROAS kind of optimization with a lot of that. So, but then you also have stores that might feel threatened by, e-com stealing their sale. Is there a balance between budgeting for clicks versus reach, or is you know what I mean? Does it not even matter?
So the consumer doesn't care.
Right.
The consumer doesn't care. And what we care about is the consumer and where the consumer is going to buy. Often, still today, some organizations, some organizations will still have the depending on their business model, right? Franchisees are different than corporate models, but depending on the organizations, there are still debates on who gets a sale, where how the friction that you could potentially create between an e-com sale versus an in-store sale. Consumer doesn't care. The consumer has their needs and their expectations, and more and more those expectations are omni-channel.
Right.
And so it's the job of retailers to make that experience from online to in-store very, very seamless. And even if you look at some of the best practices, you'll have retailers that have apps that if you have either liked a product or put it in your basket or on your wish list, when you walk in front of that product in store, they'll send you a notification and say, hey, that product you're looking for is right here if you want to pick it up and it's on sale. So the level of sophistication that retailers are getting into to close the sale for someone who's shown some form of purchase intent is really making them win.
That's an interesting example because it goes back to the idea of personalization, and maybe, through an app, because I've now invested myself in your ecosystem, then I am expecting more of that one-to-one kind of communication. So it may be something unique. So I'm walking by the footwear wall or walking by, the doohickey in Canadian Tire. Here it is. Here's that doohickey that you're looking for.
They have a lot.
When I think about, there's a lot of doohickeys. I love Canadian Tire. If I could just
we all
wander in there. I think the flip side of that is, and I don't want to come back to the whole personalization. It's almost that the expectation of a consumer, is it the personalized ad or is it the personalized experience that gets them closer to that product? And I think in my mind, it's almost that if you can create those experiences through a platform, like an application, I think that weighs a lot more onto the consumer, than just hyper focusing on what that personalization looks like from an ad perspective.
It's much more about the experience and how retailers are connecting what they know about the consumer's online experience to their shopping experience in store, and the other way around.
And in some ways, it's about revenue, Q4, and driving sales. But I keep thinking back to this. We're gonna e-com sales versus in-store sales, and there's experiences where some retailers, not naming any names, would hide products online because the thought was they make people go in store. But then putting that kind of content in context with what you're saying with retail media, if you do those kinds of things, and there's so many people in market, there's also a long play here, which is around first-party data, I think, where you can gain a lot of future revenues by making all of the inventory available online and just focusing on the customer needs first, let alone forgetting your internal politics, and just making everything available to the customer so that you're serving that need instead, and then learning how to profit off of that too.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described is a typical example of what not to do. The job of the retailer is not to force fit a customer into a sales channel, whether it's online or in store. The job of the marketer is to make products available as easily as possible to the consumer. So whatever decision you're making, whether it's, which products do we promote where, what price, it should always be through the lens of how easily are we going to make this accessible to the consumer. And the consumer doesn't care if it's online or offline.
Mm-hmm.
You should just make it easy everywhere.
Mhm.
And to that point, more and more, I mean, this is not a new trend. It's now kind of table stakes. Social commerce has grown significantly over the past 3 to 5 years, because we understand that while people are on TikTok, there's a really big opportunity to sell products to them. So we should, really making your product available everywhere and making it easy for consumers to find your product is the role of marketers, especially in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, like because that's the equivalent of like we're going to hide stuff online to make it available only in store. The equivalent of that is we're not going to sell on TikTok or on Instagram in their stores because we want people to come to our digital store. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We can't have a conversation around Q4 without having a conversation around measurement and ROI and things like that. Because at the end of the day, even the advertisers that do have the deepest pockets, the thing that they're still talking around, especially at the boardroom level, they're still talking about the return on investment that has happened. So I'd love to take some time, just kind of, have you walk us through what you're seeing from a key performance indicator perspective. Maybe there's been a shift in terms of how Q4 is measured. But more importantly, what are those, what are those activity-based metrics or outcome-based metrics that marketers should be focused on in Q4 to help drive at the end of the day? Well, I guess retailers want profitability, but really measuring that becomes important.
Yeah, so a couple of things to touch upon here. One is it's really important to make decisions, like intentful decisions, on your lens of performance. So what is your attribution model? Are you giving all credit to your advertising effort to the last touch point that you had with the consumer, or do you have a clear understanding of what the journey was, the ad journey was, and therefore know that it wasn't that last click, it was a combination of 3 or 4 different advertising efforts? That, and as well understanding the source. How many debates have we all been in on, like, is it a sales to the website? Is it a sales to the advertising effort? Because we look at those, there are different tools to measure that same metric of return on ad spend. So a GA analytics would not, or G4 would not provide the same result on that same metric than a campaign manager would, for example. So that's one. But understanding the MMM is the nirvana of measurement, because that kind of really allows you to have that understanding of business impact. I think over time, as our ad dollars have migrated more and more digitally, we've become very inward as an industry. We use our own media performance often, like our own campaign performance, often media, as an indication of success. And that's probably a mistake. You need to have a better understanding of the category, the macro factors, the competition. Weather in Canada drives a lot. So it's important to have just kind of that big picture, as opposed to only looking at our inward data and the performance of the last campaign that we ran, or the campaign at the same period last year that we ran, as an indication of performance.
I love that you highlighted that, and the reason why is I think Q4 you can become very siloed in your channel analytics, where you're looking at it and say, oh my goodness, look at search, it's crushing it from a ROAS perspective, or whatever the case may be, and then you start assessing your channels through that one lens alone, but you're not taking into consideration the broader impact that this could be having. So it's interesting that you're even suggesting, like, even during something like the Cyber 5 or Q4, you're still looking at it as, and using MMM as that grounding source to say, here's how we're going to approach it, and here's how we're going to measure our ability to be effective across the media landscape. So I like that you highlighted that.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I know, like, we've done this before, all of us, but like, if you add up all the attribution of what each channel tells you they sold, it's way more than your actual revenue.
Way more than what's in the bank account, right? How many of us have been in a meeting where our search partner says, just give us more money, we'll give you more return.
Don't get me started. Has there been any changes to the tools or technologies that now advertisers can really lean heavier in to help with that measurement in the near term, especially during something like Q4?
Yeah, I mean, measurement is such a big conversation. We live in the world of walled gardens. That's
Mm-hmm.
essentially, there are a ton of problems out of that. It's not interoperable, so we don't have one clear across the line view of what performance is.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's grading their own homework.
Yeah.
And so everyone's like, to Mark's point, where we have one partner saying I generated this much in revenue, two other partners saying it generated this much, and the sum of all of that doesn't add up to what's in the bank account.
Yeah.
So there are obviously clean rooms, and there are different tech solutions that are like ID based that allow you to connect their channel to your outcomes, that are certainly quite frequently used in our client base.
Right.
But first party data and not relying on anyone else to tell you what your source of revenue is or your return on investment is kind of the best way,
Mm-hmm.
because it's your customers that that you
Mm-hmm.
can reach in those environments and then measure on, regardless of the walled garden
Mm-hmm.
that they're in.
What about, we've had a few conversations about measurement performance and some of the challenges with ROI. We've talked about a couple of those, or ROAS. We also had a really interesting conversation around incrementality as a total outcome, as opposed to just like channel by channel performance. I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
Yeah, if you're not measuring incrementality in 2023, you're not you're not measuring the right metric, essentially, because to your point, there are many people that are out there taking credit for sales, and most of the market, most retailers and most advertisers are public, and what people care, what the market cares about is growth.
Yeah.
So understanding what the growth is versus previous years, previous months, previous weeks is what's important. That's kind of it's not just total dollars, but of course incrementality, because it's important as well to take out organic sales. Like if you shut everything down, what would be left?
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be zero.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I just want to touch one quick thing here on incrementality, because I think it is something that is often overlooked by many marketers, unfortunately. But I'd love to kind of get your take on why is it important to make sure that you are measuring that incrementality, and why is it such a barrier for many marketers to kind of get behind?
It's not easy to measure.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest barrier, and you have to partner with a media partner that is going to help you identify that, but it becomes theoretic because it's true for one partner.
Sure.
But then you have several, so it's not easy to measure unless you have some form of ID,
Mm-hmm.
often first party. Why is it important? Is because you might not be spending your dollars where you have the highest incrementality. So you need to understand where you get the highest incremental spend versus, continue to invest your dollars in a channel that will give you return regardless of your investment.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Sam, I know we got a couple of minutes left with you. One thing I just wanted to ask about, like, we've talked about some of the great examples you guys have had and tons of great advice. Is there like just table stakes dumb things that people do that they should avoid?
In media, in the Q4, is that the question?
Yeah.
Dumb things to avoid?
No, it's life in general. Like, don't put your finger in the socket.
Yeah, I don't walk into the fourth quarter without a measurement framework.
Yeah.
Don't walk into the fourth quarter without an audience strategy.
Right.
Don't walk into the fourth quarter without knowing what's your what portion of your plan is going to be flexible depending on what happens in sales or what inventory is available. So because there has to be something like a base that you're operating on, and then elements of flexibility that you can play around with like levers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think those would
Those
be
are
the
good.
big
Yeah.
three.
Yeah. Those are really good.
Sam, this has been incredible, and we're definitely very, very thankful for your generosity and your time with us today. How can people find out more about you? I'm trying to find my words again, but there they are.
Well, our company is called Touché Media, and so we have our website is touchemedia.com. Samantha Kelley on LinkedIn, and yeah, we're part of the Omnicom Media Group in Canada, so most people know us well. But I'm always up for a good conversation. This has been fun, gentlemen.
This has been great.
Yeah, this is super fun. Yeah, thanks a lot, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Before we get to the post-pod, please leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you and love to know how to make this show better. And now for the post-pod with V and Marc. Hey, V.
Hey, buddy. Guess what?
It is the post-pod.
It is. Samantha Kelley.
Yeah, she was so good.
What a great conversation.
Yeah. I forgot. We haven't talked to her for a long time. And I forgot how much I enjoyed talking to her.
It's what's for me, the funny thing is, anytime you're with people that you've worked with in the past, you quickly start thinking about the time you were together in the trenches, so to speak. Right.
Yeah.
And I just could not stop to think, like, Q4 in retail. I loved Q4 in retail. It was a slog. Don't get me wrong. It was difficult. You're drained, but it was probably the closest thing to feeling alive in the context of, in a highly competitive environment. And I just love the real-time decision-making, all the insights that you were trying to derive from your channels at that time.
Totally.
I have to admit, like, they were great partners, and they really kind of lived and breathed the way we thought at the time. And that's the only thing that you can ask for. So it was just great. It was just great kind of reminiscing a little bit. At least I was reminiscing in my mind, but
totally. No, I was the same way. Well, even yesterday we were at that school, or earlier this week at the school doing that talk on evidence-based marketing and talking about how important partners were. And we were showing pictures of us with Sam and the
exactly. That's right.
Awesome.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome. So, what do you think about some of the things that Sam was talking about? What were some of the standout points for you?
Well, let's start out with the first percentage he shared with us was 23% of shoppers complete their shopping within Cyber Monday, Black Friday.
The Cyber 5.
The Cyber 5.
Sounds like it should be a movie.
I thought it was like an
Fast
action
5
movie,
or...
like the Fabulous 4, the Cyber 5.
The Hateful 8. Oh, that's Hateful 8.
Maybe the Cyber 5 is led by like the evil AI, so maybe it's like the other side.
Yeah.
I don't know. But so I thought that was interesting. I do recall, I don't remember the percentage, like we had similar stats at the time when we were at least working with them. But to see that's still 23%, that's actually, I guess it's quite high. I didn't expect it to be that high.
That's big.
So
yeah, and later on in the conversation we talked about how to allocate budget according to those days during those Cyber 5, and I think there's probably a really high, and the way I saw it in my head was like a long tail thing where over those 5 days, you have way more sales day 1 than day 5. So as far as budget allocation goes, it's kind of interesting thinking about how you can space out your opportunities from a budgeting perspective. But yeah, like, don't underestimate those 5 days.
No. And
it's a massive opportunity.
And I would actually argue that, she talked about from a budget allocation, when you're thinking about the holiday season, making sure like you're potentially trying to front load your budgets.
Mm-hmm.
Now with that 23% there, that kind of makes sense. There's a huge opportunity. And maybe if you are a smaller brand or a smaller budget and have smaller budgets, maybe it makes sense for you to really think about, hey, how do you kind of capture that share as early as possible? And hopefully then through other remarketing or retargeting tactics that you can kind of maintain that level of being top of mind throughout the rest of the holiday season. That could be a way of approaching it, because it just goes to show you there's so much intent happening at that point. You don't have to really go and find it. It's there. It's organically there. So how do you capitalize on that. So
Totally.
yeah. What's one thing that kind of stuck out for you there?
Well, she mentioned something about delivering memorable impressions and talking about the research from Karen Nelson Field around attention, which I thought was really, I mean, we actually haven't talked about that at all, I don't think, yet.
No, we
in
haven't.
the podcast. But as she was talking about, I was thinking about the irony of a non-viewable impression, which is a thing that you can measure. So for me, that was interesting for a whole bunch of reasons. But there are a whole bunch of people in the market, and there are a lot of buyers. There's a lot of buyer activity, and there's a lot of natural inclination, I would imagine, for a lot of advertisers to say, let's maximize our media spend by buying cheap media and getting the best bang for our buck. And so it might not be the right way to go as far as just buying cheap stuff. You kind of get what you pay for, I think, in a lot of cases. So impressions that people pay attention to matter a lot. And I think that's an opportunity for as far as budget allocation goes as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's always, for me at least, it's always great when you hear other professionals, cite, research like this and using it potentially to inform strategic decisions in organizations. It kind of fills you with confidence, and they're looking at it and they're understanding it as holistically as possible. Because remember, when it comes down to, especially like winning like Q4, it doesn't have to be too complicated, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes as marketers, we get all caught up in the hype and, chasing that new thing. And it just, Q4 is simple. She used the term scrappy, and I couldn't agree more. It's a roll up your sleeves moment, and you really just have to be comfortable. And I like that she also highlighted the fact that, it's not really a time to be too A/B testy or, testing and learning. The testing should be what you already have in place.
Yeah,
exactly. And then the learning is like what actually transpired in Q4 versus doing like the micro tests and trying to understand, like, it's not the time to be doing that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was a good point. The other part that I thought was interesting was she was talking about focus.
Strategist focus.
Yeah, which totally agree with. And some of the takeaways were: be prepared, stop testing, as you talked about, be flexible, but have some kind of
avoid the ditches.
Yeah, stable is the word she used. I was trying to read my own writing. So, but the audience strategy component was really interesting. I was in a conversation yesterday around like one with this particular client. There's an opportunity for people to look at, or for this person to look at, direct to consumer versus buyers, category buyers. And so there's a natural tendency to go, oh, well, we can win, we can do stuff and generate revenue because there's a lot of people buying now. But I think that's also around the idea around focus and the play to win strategy. If that's not your thing, part of your focus might be to say, we're not going to do that just because there's people buying.
Yeah.
We're going to do this, and we're going to stick to our plan and be flexible within that plan. But there's, I think, an opportunity to take moments like this retail moment and just be super clear and review what your strategy is and who you're focusing on so that you can build a proper audience plan.
I love that. It's almost like you're taking, you need to be very surgical in a sense for this, because you have to be really targeted. And I'm using that word not in the context of like personalized and whatnot, but just a targeted focus that you build a strategy around. And it starts with an audience at the end of the day. But it goes back to, even talk about like the speaking engagement that we had a couple of days ago now, or sorry, by the time this airs, but last week, really making sure that you have that sense of segmentation, you have that sense of following, especially going into Q4.
Yeah.
But you need to make sure that at the end of the day, that it's being augmented with first party data as well. And that's where some of the modeling comes in to make sure that you are driving the highest opportunity to sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, adding to the complexity of that, or she talked about sophistication, But the reach within your target audience
Yeah.
matters, because there's a lot of people that are buying, and there's a lot of activity in all categories.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to spend all of your money on powdering sugar, as one of our former leaders used to say, on all these different opportunities. But if you're not maximizing the reach within your core audience, your target audience, you might be missing some of the opportunity in terms of revenue and profit.
I absolutely love that, because I also think, and I'm not going to go on a tangent, I'm going to try to constrain myself a little bit.
Go.
But here's the thing around like performance marketers and whatnot. I would argue in a lot of this context, Q4, you're probably going to be a lot more performance oriented in the way you're measuring, in the way
Sure.
you're, tactics, etc. Performance marketing can also be high reach, have a high reach, a targeted high reach. Sorry, that's what I was going for. Right.
Yeah.
Would technically fall under that purview of, under the performance side. So that's where for me, there's like this misunderstanding of how effective performance marketing could be, even in those high reach tactics, versus just thinking about brand as being kind of in that space. Mm-hmm. So when I tie that back to something like Q4, I absolutely love that she said that, you look to maximize the reach within a targeted audience, because it's not just about the low hanging fruit that is like, remarketing audiences, lookalike audiences, all these like behavioral targeting tactics. Like, it's not just that, you can really kind of drive reach as well. And I loved our conversation around the idea of personalization in Q4. It is important. I understand that, but it's where it's happening that's probably more important, where it can be easily, I guess, from a consumer's perspective, more expected. I may have saw a product online and being targeted with a carousel ad. Cool. There's maybe a reason why I didn't buy it. Maybe it wasn't the right price, or it's already top of mind for me. Something has to be said that I may be enticed with an ad for something that I didn't even think I needed. So that's where there's, I think especially in Q4, you have to be very careful on how targeted you become versus how awareness driven your brand, you're trying to, you're focused for that time period.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah. I think it does come down to having a good understanding of the landscape.
Yeah.
Like, of what the potential opportunities are. And the being prepared part in advance. Because when you're in the moment, you just see dollars flying.
Yeah.
Right. And it's exciting and it's sexy and you want to be a part of it. Right.
Oh yeah.
And I think that she mentioned something about that too, where you've got a plan going into Black Friday, Cyber Monday, holiday period.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of opportunities, sometimes because there's a lot of opportunities, sometimes because things aren't going as well. And so you start changing things.
Yep.
And if you don't have a really crystal clear plan, to her point, everything looks like an opportunity and everything looks like something worth doing.
Yeah.
But then you get to the end of it and you're like, well, what happened? We're like, I don't know. Because we did all these things. We didn't really stick to any kind of objective.
Well, and anyone who's been in retail, you won't have time to truly analyze that till like the new year, because you go off the heels of a holiday season, your first sale of the year. It's like a clearance event that starts in January. The only real opportunity for you to go back and do a full post-campaign analysis on things like your holiday season strategies becomes maybe February, March. But teams are usually prepping for a big brand moment. Like it's such... I miss those days, if I'm honest. I just love the velocity that we operated in, because we weren't also, I had a problem saying this last time, analysis paralysis or whatever, where we didn't get too caught up in all the nuances of all the different data points. We just, here's what we're going with. This is what we're measuring. This is how we're aligning and we're going. And I like that speed, that agility.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think, we talked a lot about retail, and I think mostly about retail, but there are, like, Black Friday, Cyber Monday isn't exclusively a retail opportunity. There's,
That's true.
like, you and I last year, we record on Riverside.
Yeah.
I
That's a
would
good point.
consider that more of a business to business platform.
Yeah.
Well, at least for us, like, I would consider that a business to business platform. And they had a Black Friday sale, which is how we ended up buying that year's subscription.
Thanks, Riverside.
Yeah.
You can sponsor us too, Riverside, if you want.
Yeah. But there's so many opportunities that way. There's just an appetite for people to buy things in any category. And
Sure.
and B2B buyers, retail buyers are also B2B buyers
Mm-hmm.
or B2C buyers. Just because you work in one discipline doesn't mean that you only think in one discipline.
That's true. That's a great point. Another thing I wanted to highlight is just the notion of overcorrection.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important distinction to make, because if you think about, when things aren't going your way, and all of a sudden senior leadership's coming down and being like, what's happening? Why is this not working? And often what happens is they come in with their own, here's how you fix it ideas,
Right.
which may cause you to either overcorrect. So it's like, I think Sam was saying, is like from ditch to ditch, or I think you said from ditch to ditch.
Yeah, I think she did, but yeah.
But I think that's a real thing, and you have to be very careful. And this is where, going back to what you said earlier, being prepared and saying, almost having like contingency plans, and understanding that, in those moments when things are maybe not going our way, we're not going to overcorrect, or we're going to take these actions. So then you already have something in the playbook that says, okay, we're going to revisit our strategy on search, or we're going to revisit our, remarketing, whatever, it could be anything, but overcorrection, be careful.
Yeah. Well, and again, going back to I think you mentioned it, but going back to the point around like having a plan to begin with and knowing what things you're going to measure and what success looks like before going into the period of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because you come out of it and it's super fast. And to your point, there's all kinds of things that happen, and sometimes lots of stress and sometimes lots of opportunities, and things are just moving fast. And so without having a plan clearly articulated at the beginning with a clear set of measurement frameworks, and a clear objective, then you kind of there's nothing to push back against on the ditch to ditch conversations, because then there's no other justification to not do it. You just do it because somebody, like someone with more authority, said that you should. And it's hard to justify why you shouldn't if there wasn't a clear plan in place to begin with.
That's a great point. What else do we have here? So many I got 3 pages of notes. Jesus.
Incrementality was one thing.
How about touch on that? Like that's huge.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, and you brought up the point around, she mentioned it was really difficult for a lot of companies to do well. And for small businesses, I think it's really, really difficult. But I think with more and more of the AI stuff that's going on, like I know Grace Kite actually has a media planning tool that's used media mix modeling to help you understand things that you, in terms of planning and media planning and audience planning, which is great. And I think as AI becomes more and more robust, there's probably more of that coming for the small businesses.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So there's a huge opportunity, I think, for anybody to understand media mix modeling and understand incrementality, whether they can do it or not. I think it's worthwhile looking at, because it's important, and profit above and beyond regular baseline organic sales is really valuable. To know what's really happening. And I think, like I said, all the AI stuff that's coming, I'm sure, I can only imagine, like, that's a problem that people are trying to solve, and there's going to be people that are going to solve it.
Avanish was very, very vocal about this too in the podcast that we recorded with him. It's like, if you're not measuring incrementality, you're not understanding your true effectiveness from a marketing perspective. And I remember he was saying that you have to first start in identifying incrementality by channel. So the channel silos, they exist, but understand how the incrementality is being driven by your channels. Then you start,
that's his ladders of awesomeness.
Ladder of awesomeness, right? So then it's like, well, what's the next thing? Then you kind of start modeling what does incrementality look like from a total marketing spend perspective, right? And I think that's something, again, you're not going to think about in Q4, but you better be prepared to be able to measure that. And then at the end of it, when you're doing your post-campaign analysis, you're saying, okay, incrementally, we can attribute this volume of sales. And that becomes a lot easier to fight for budgets in the following year, or, kind of be, I guess, just more transparent, I think, within the organization.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, overall, it was just such a fun conversation, and I think it's so topical for right now.
Yeah.
But even if it weren't for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, I mean, that was the reason why we talked to her. But just I think those things matter to begin with, no matter what, like focus, having a strategy, understanding your audience, that, being flexible but stable, like those are just good takeaways.
Measurement framework.
Yeah, having a clear measurement framework, like to begin with for anybody at any point in the year. But I think it really comes down to make a difference in the Q4, because there's so much distraction, because there's so much opportunity.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I'll just close by saying, Sam, this was incredible. Thanks for taking the time. She tells us that she's an avid listener, so she'll hear the post pod. Yeah. We'll test her. But it was an incredible conversation. We really appreciate the time that you took to meet with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. That was awesome.
All right, man.
Dun, dun, dun.
Go.
We're not retaking anything. We're just going to splice this in. So until next week,
go chase profitability. Is it going to stick?